opportunity to present our work today, which really is our experience around multidisciplinary point-of-care testing for HIV and TB for integration of services. So we really have to ask the question, is there a need for point-of-care testing? And just to remind you that this really refers to testing that is performed near or at the site of the patient, with the result leading to a possible change in the care of the patient. With the successes of implementation of ART and TB treatment, remains the ability to diagnose and to monitor both those infections. So this is hampered by the lack of laboratory infrastructure, technical skill, and poor integration of HIV and TB services. So point of care promises to alleviate these problems. We performed a study at Tembeletu Clinic where we implemented and established our first point of care clinic laboratory with multidisciplinary point of care platforms, and I've shown them in the table that we looked at platforms for CD4 testing, hemoglobin analysis, ALT, creatinine, lactate, TB for active infection, which is the really buzzword these days, the GeneXpert for the Expert MTB-RIF assay, which I'm sure you are familiar with, and viral load testing, which was currently, as you know, unavailable as a point-of-care platform. So we selected these platforms based on the South African treatment guidelines. We performed clinic assessments of the site. We developed SOPs and training manuals for these particular platforms. We trained the nurse operators for point of care, performed verification. Now that is to show that the platforms are fit for purpose after they've been placed. We looked at performing a validation and quality control, and this for each of the instruments, and this is really nurse operated versus laboratory generated tests, and we performed this on 160 samples. And part of this also was to develop an external quality assessment program. So I've put on your left just a list of, and it's really not an exhaustive list, some of the clinic duties that we saw that the nurses were involved in. And on the right is really the point of care duties, which really now takes pre-analytical, analytical, and post-analytical duties that are mostly performed by laboratories. And all those, the list of all those duties, the ones I've underlined, are obviously not to be performed daily. So although it looks like a very long list of new point of care techniques that have to be performed, those duties are not performed every single day. Just on the testing side, I need to mention that the ALT, creatinine, lactate, and hemoglobin testing platforms, the result can be generated within 2 minutes. A PIMA CD4 test using the PIMA instrument within 20 minutes, and the Expert MTB-RIF, the TB diagnostic assay, takes 2 hours. So we had to fill this in within the workload of the nurse at the clinic. And combining both the clinic duties and the point of care duties, and noting the type of platforms and the time to result, enabled a single point of care nurse to test 5 patients per day. And that was excluding TB testing. So the findings in this first phase, we developed the SOP manuals according to point of care good clinical laboratory practice format, but found really that quick reference charts, and I've shown a couple up there, actually were most effective. They reminded the operator on site as they were performing the test. The training and centralized facilities required an estimated about a half a day per platform, but the GeneXpert required a full day due to the computer and software operations. And we found that often nurse-operated point-of-care users were not that familiar with computers or software. So that took most of the training time. We also felt that on-site test witnessing improved the training and assisted the point-of-care nurses. And we also looked at quality control testing and used that as a measure of the training. Out of 18 trainees, we found with pre and post testing that it improved the knowledge by 8.3%. The validation of the nurse versus laboratory, and I must emphasize this is venipuncture point of care testing, showed that more than 50% of patients required more than 3 tests. So that is a finger prick, more than 3 finger pricks per visit. And that obviously has implications for the way in which you collect the blood or the acceptance from the patients. The results of the comparison between nurse versus laboratory operated on all the platforms were really well within the allowable limits, a little bit borderline for the ALT, but that's also to be expected. So how can health systems information technology assist? And again, I'll show you the same slide, but now I've highlighted all the activities or duties that can actually be performed using information technology. And we also know that as little as 10% of point-of-care tests are managed by central laboratory information systems. Billing and data management often are handled manually. So we feel that information technology is really important to allow point-of-care to be handled correctly. And that really is one of our biggest hurdles that we've found, is the connectivity. I've put up 2 pie charts which show you of the instruments that we used, what kind of connectivity they currently have, and what kind of communication protocols they use. This is really the computer language that's used by each of the instruments to be able to communicate with the central database. And again, quite an exhaustive list of why things are not working in the IT environment. Even in spite of the Connectivity Industry Consortium that says that all point-of-care devices should connect to data management of all types. They're non-standard protocols, they require unique information transmission, and you can have a look at the list that I've put up there. So the current situation for connectivity of these instruments that we used shows that some of them have got bidirectionality and have got communication protocols that can communicate with the host laboratory and hospital information system, but several of them can't, which would mean manual entry or specific. The other problem was some of them have proprietary communication protocols, so we cannot actually use them for data management connection. Ideally, this is what we would like, for all the point-of-care instruments to be connected to a universal point-of-care device interface program, and that in a bidirectional format can communicate with the host and the laboratory and information system, as well as clinical data information system. So this has led us to form collaboration with several communication protocol developers, as well as in-house development. We have engaged with several software solution consortia and groups which have demonstrated connectivity to most of the instruments or in manual format. And the question that I've put at the bottom there is added cost to this. We've in-house developed something called the TVGX Companion, which can be placed on the GeneXpert computer that accompanies the instrument to help collect data, clinical data, as well as enter results. And this is for areas, specifically clinics, that are not currently connected to the existing laboratory information software. As far as EQA, proficiency testing, external quality assessment, is a way of maintaining the performance of tests at point of care. We've engaged with the NHLS's existing programs for CD4, hemoglobin and lactate, but creatinine and ALT do not have a dry format EQA currently, and neither do the TB GeneXpert assay for external quality assessment. We've developed our own TB dried culture spot external quality assessment program, and I've just shown the way in which we do this. with culture that's inactivated, quantitated by flow cytometry, then spotted onto filter cards, which most of you are familiar with in the dry blood spot format, and then perform the GeneXpert test using this to verify the instrument. And we've also developed an in-house IT solution to be able to forward all the CSV files from the instrument to a central data place to monitor the EQA. So finally, out of this point-of-care multidisciplinary study that we looked at, we identified the hurdles, and I've given quite a good list there, and next to it really is clinic workflow. We need to be able to integrate point-of-care testing into a daily routine. The data management, information, and interfacing is still a big hurdle. And I've put a question there to translate this to remote settings. Impact on patients' outcome using point-of-care, cost analysis, and safety. And this we will continue looking at in a randomized control trial. Thank you for your time, and I see it's flashing red, so that means I have to stop.